morning, and thank you for joining me for today's midweek reflection. Unless you've been really very busy over the last couple of weeks, you will surely be aware that our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is stepping down, and that there is currently a contest underway in the Conservative Party to succeed him. A contest which at times seems quite angry and quite heated. I'm aware that many people find politics unbelievably dull. It is, isn't it, alongside religion, one of those topics that you're really not meant to engage with in polite conversation if you want that conversation to flow nicely and easily. I have to confess, I'm one of those rather eccentric people that find it all, though, deeply fascinating. But I'm very much aware that over the last few decades, people have become more and more disconnected and disenchanted from the whole apparatus and the whole business of government and politics. Back in the 1950s, membership of political parties was actually fairly high, and turnout in general elections was very high. Sadly nowadays, a lot fewer than 2/3 of us who could actually vote actually go and do so, both in general elections and especially in local elections. I often hear people say, what's the point in voting? Politicians, they're all much the same. They're all the same rum lot. One famous Labour politician actually said if voting changed anything, they'd abolish it. And we sadly tend to think the worst of many of those people who make the choice to go into politics. Sometimes they don't help themselves. We are aware of scandals and ways in which they let themselves down and therefore tarnish the whole business of it. But I also wonder if maybe it's true that in a democracy, people eventually get the government that they deserve. And I think we should resist the rather easy, perhaps slightly lazy temptation to just be hugely and overly cynical about all those people who often actually make quite significant sacrifices in order to go into politics and public life. And I do tend to think that the vast majority of people who do so, wherever they are in terms of the political parties on the spectrum and whatever their views on Brexit and everything else, I think the vast majority of people do so for the very best of reasons. I think that they are men and women who want to make their community or want to make the world at large a much better place, even if we don't all have the same picture of what a better world actually looks like. And I think we should try to draw strength and encouragement and inspiration from one or two of those giants in Christianity who have gone before us and who have used their Christian faith to inspire and encourage them to bring about real change. Think, for example, about William Wilberforce, whose evangelical Christianity really did fire him up to successfully bring about eventual real change and ultimately an end to slavery within the British Empire. Or think of the Quaker Elizabeth Fry, who, although she was around at a time when women had really very little power and very little status in society as a whole, nonetheless she was a really powerful campaigner and was hugely successful in bringing about lasting, permanent change to the way the British prison system worked. And think as well of that great giant of the 19th century, William Gladstone, whose Christianity and whose immersion in the Christian Gospels really grounded him and inspired him throughout all of his 6 decades in public life. Now, admittedly, this contest, which is about to take place in the coming weeks, unless we're a member of the Conservative Party, most of us don't really have very much say in it at all. But we do nonetheless have plenty of opportunity to vote and to have our say and to make our views known and to actually be people who can bring about real change. And so before we become too cynical, maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, what have I done? What have I done and what can I do to be an instrument of change in the world around me? And most of all, I think we should hold before us the very sobering thoughts of Winston Churchill when he said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones that have so far been tried. Our hymn today is one in which Christ beckons us, he urges us to go out into our world and to be his agents of change, to make the world a better place. Our hymn is Jesus Christ is Waiting.
Jesus